Hello, folks that are tuning in. I'm just going to wait a minute here till people join. I'm drinking my Greens Plus with a bit of liposomal vitamin C in there. It helps build a healthy immune system. And it's not too disgusting. So welcome to the broadcast tonight. I am going live in the new group that was created today to help share local information for people in Strathroy about the coronavirus, because I was getting some notifications privately from people who are under non-disclosure agreements that for privacy reasons, they couldn't disclose that there was a confirmed case. And that kind of made me a little bit infuriated that our local authorities would not tell us that there was a coronavirus case confirmed. And like, I'm trying not to be judgmental, but I'm watching how this is unfolding all over the world, and I don't want to see it happen to us here, where the authorities just don't know how to be transparent, and they think that they'll cause a panic by telling you the real information. Well, I'll tell you what, the panic is going to be caused by when people don't get the real information, and then all of a sudden there's an outbreak. So I just really want to urge anybody that's knows someone from any of the local authorities, like, transparency and honesty is always going to be the best thing to do in this situation when there's a local outbreak starting. And so what happens is this virus can be spread asymptomatically for up to 24 days. That's an edge case. Most of it is, I've been reading, the most shedding is up to 4 days before you get the virus, and during the few days of when you're first getting the virus, that's when most of the viral shed happens. So that's why this is so much different than MERS and SARS and Ebola and other coronaviruses, because as soon as you show symptoms, that's when you're spreading the virus with the other coronaviruses. And that's why this one's dangerous, because you don't show symptoms until many days after you get the virus. And so you can be out going to work, going to this grocery store, your kids can be going to school, and the virus is spreading. So we had a confirmation on Friday the 13th that in Strathroy there was a confirmed case of one of the nurses at the clinic. And we were just told about it today, and I bet you most people aren't even aware that that's happened yet. So it's confirmed. You can go on the website and you can see it's confirmed. There's been no real press release or notice about it yet. And actually, there was a message put out yesterday by the Middlesex Health Unit, and they said that there was a case confirmed in Middlesex, but they didn't say where. But was the one in Strathroy, like 99%. That's sure. Or there's two. There was two confirmations, but at least there's one confirmed case locally, and what that means is that, this person was not traveling overseas. They got it from a community spread, which means it's spreading locally in Strathroy. And that's why schools have been shut down. That's why everybody has to get off just the flu thing and stop being complacent and really treat this seriously, because our public health officials are not going to tell us the full truth because they fear causing panic. They want to say things like, we have complete confidence in our health system. They want to say things like, we have this under control. Because their messaging is like more geared towards not causing panic, not crashing the stock market, things like that. And unfortunately, that's not worked so far from the national level. The messaging that the United States and Canada has been giving so far was to try to signal to the stock market. But then last week we had one of the most historic stock market crashes in history. So now they've changed their tune, and that's why we see all over Canada and the United States, they're actually taking the proper measures to contain this thing, canceling schools. I got some information from some people that work in the LCBO, and another guy works in the government, and this is just a rumor, so I wouldn't give this much confidence, like 50% confidence or less, that the Ontario is going to cancel most businesses tomorrow. So any non-essential businesses will be closed, and that's happening in Ohio, where there's a local spread as well. So you may be working from home tomorrow. Grocery stores, gas stations, things like that are going to be staying open. They may have different hours, but that'll be a developing thing. But this will definitely start happening over the next couple of weeks, so that you can expect that. Whether it happens tomorrow or not, you can definitely expect that's going to happen. And just because coronavirus is spreading locally, it's like there's two ways to think about this. The first is just let's get the information and not panic about it. So as long as you have the information, you can decide if you're going to panic or not. If you don't have the information, it's going to breed discontent and it's going to breed skepticism towards the authorities. And that's why I started this group and have been doing these videos, because people aren't telling us the information fast enough. We've seen from places where outbreaks happen, like in Ohio and in Washington and in Italy and in China. France is going through it right now. Spain just suspended all businesses and travel. When the information is not given fast enough, then people start to panic. That's when you start to see toilet paper disappearing from the shelves. When we're given proper information and they say, yes, there's local spreading happening, please stay home. The way that we have to fight this together is for everybody to get on the right path and stay home, cancel your events, stop traveling. That's the only way to really stop the coronavirus, the COVID-19 from spreading. It's going to hurt a lot of people economically. It's going to suck. And there's going to be some short-term uncertainty about your job, about how you're going to pay for rent. And we heard from from the national level that they're going to pull out the stops, right? They're going to try to do whatever they can to help people through these difficult economic times. I'm already getting messages like left and right from people who are saying that their jobs are in jeopardy. And we'll see more of that as the weeks go by, because we are kind of in a complacent place right now, and I imagine over the next week or two that will change, and we won't be complacent, and everybody's got to be on the same page that we're going to be in this together, and it's going to suck, it's going to hurt, but preparing for it is not panicking. And we're all adults, and we can be given the true information and the proper information, and we're not going to panic, and we know how to handle ourselves. So I'd urge any local officials, or if you're connected to any local officials, just urge for transparency and saying things like we have the full confidence in our local hospitals to be able to handle an outbreak. It's just dishonest. We do not have the capacity. We don't have the lung, the oxygen machines, and the intubation capacity and the ICU beds to handle a major outbreak in the local hospital. That's why it's so important now, while this is not affecting our lives, for everybody to treat it as serious as possible. Because if it gets to the point where it is in other countries, where they have to start triaging people, which basically means if there's, say, 5,000 people that have coronavirus in the little town of Strathroy that I live in, if there's 5,000 people, that's 25% or so of the population. There's about a 20% case, it's actually about a 2% case mortality rate, but the complication rate is about 20%. So that means, 1,000 people are going to need to be in the hospital. We don't have 1,000 free hospital beds in Strathroy. So that's why you need to stop it as soon as possible to prevent, they call it flattening the curve. And the curve is the bulk of the infections, the bulk of the hospitalization needs. And this is not to say that just because you're hospitalized, that means you're going to die. You're going to need oxygen, you're going to need fluids, you're just going to need, you may need to go to an ICU, but that's a low percentage of total people who get the coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2, are going to need that kind of level of care. But the point is not that this is so dangerous that we all have to be scared of this coronavirus. The point is that we don't want to have the hospital system locally overwhelmed. So we got to do our part to kind of educate people and be patient with them, because there's a lot of people coming at me because I started this group saying things like you're fear-mongering and you're spreading panic and alarm and, things like that. But it's like I've been following this since the end of January when it happened. The original outbreak happened in Wuhan, and I've seen the consequences of what's coming if we don't take this seriously and start obeying the suggested quarantines and stuff like that. And so I I was talking to somebody who I respect a lot, who's a nurse, and I mean a paramedic, and the paramedics, honestly, and the nurses are going to be the heroes of this in the end. The doctors and the nurses and the paramedics and the police officers and everything. So, as citizens, we got to do what we can to obey these quarantines when they start to ask us to stay home from work and stay home from stag and does and hockey and stuff like that, because it's going to end up costing medical personnel their lives if we don't. Honestly, that's what's going to happen. So we seriously have to take it. The most risk is elderly people, immune compromised people, and honestly the frontline staff, the doctors, the nurses, the paramedics, and everything. So I really respect people's opinions that work in the medical field, and I want to urge everybody to read between the lines, I guess, of what they're telling us, because they're trying not to cause a panic, but you gotta kind of read between the lines. Braden said, is there any leads that Strathroy may open assessment center, or is it such a small town to have this happen? Will people need to go to London? So the latest guidance that came in that I saw from the Middlesex Health Unit was that if you're experiencing mild symptoms, so in the UK, in New Zealand, and it seems like here in Canada, the response is, as far as I can tell, we're not prepared. We don't have the test kits available, so we can't test everybody yet. So they're trying to push a message of, if you don't have serious symptoms, you don't need to get tested. You can just assume you have the coronavirus and you stay home, you isolate. It's not affected us that much yet, so people aren't getting that message. People that came back from trips overseas where there's infections happening, they're not self-quarantining yet. There's a couple of families locally that are, but people don't generally get that message yet. If they've come back from vacation, they're going to work, they're going to like social activities, they're meeting with family members, meeting with neighbors, whatever, and that's a perfect way to continue spreading the virus. So what the best situation is that you test often, test everybody that has any kind of symptoms or is suspected of coming in contact with somebody, and then that's how South Korea did it, that's how Singapore did it, that's how China ended up doing it, was tons of testing. So here locally, we've only got like 5 test kits last I heard in our local hospital, and in Canada in general, there's a shortage of test kits, and that's why our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has not been tested yet, because he's trying to be an example of this kind of absurd rule of you don't need to get tested unless you're showing severe symptoms. Now, they're not going to do, as far as I know, Braden, they're not going to do a local assessment center. The one that was announced was in London, that they're going to try to put everybody there that wanted to get tested, but I don't even think that's a test center. I think that's just like, for now, it's going to be like a call center where you can call and ask. So the local guidelines that they've given us so far is, assume you have the coronavirus if you've got the symptoms, and self-quarantine. And then you can likely get over it yourself at home, and only if you have the respiratory symptoms, like the ARDS or something like that. Like if you've got really bad respiratory shortness of breath and stuff happening, then you go into the hospital. But actually, they say you should call the Telehealth Ontario number first, and then they will tell you what to do, because this is going to be tough for them to manage. And the health officials are all aware that we're at capacity already with just the general flu season, and like adding coronavirus on top of it is just going to be a real tough challenge. So Telehealth Ontario is going to be one way, but I'm just really hoping that we're going to get enough test kits in the next couple of weeks, and that will change, and then we'll be able to test often, and then be able to get a handle on it, because you need to test people to enforce quarantine, or to know to stay home. Because if you put yourself in the mindset of the average person who's living paycheck to paycheck and like needs to just think about making next month's rent, if you are, mild symptoms, are you going to actually stay home from work for 2 weeks to quarantine yourself and risk like getting behind on your rent? Like, not likely. So that's why this complacency sort of like suggested quarantine thing is not going to work well for us, and we have to take it more seriously. And the government has announced that they're going to try to do stimulus for people. Italy suspended rent payments and mortgage payments for like 2 months just recently. The United States just announced $700 billion in quantitative easing, which is just basically giving money away to businesses and banks. And that's not the end of it. Like, there's going to be multiple trillions of dollars printed by the time this is over to help stave off a depression and just keep it to like a small, or sort of like a bear market or a recession. Because you think about the effects, the downstream effects, the second order effects of people staying home in quarantine and businesses being shut down and school being stopped. It's going to cause a lot of economic hurt. It's going to cause people to lose their jobs, or at least like be temporarily laid off. Businesses are going to find it hard to meet payroll. Businesses are going to find it hard to stock their supplies, and lines of credit are going to dry up. So it's going to be tough, and the government's going to have to come in and step in and do fiscal stimulus. So you can expect that they're going to want to help businesses, help people directly, like checks deposited straight to your bank account in a month or two. I'm going to imagine there's going to be thousands of dollars deposited into people's accounts, in order to keep people voluntarily, like, obeying these social distancing rules. Rob said that the one in London is just an assessment center. They will not be testing there. Yeah, that's a good point. And again, like I hope as we get the test kits, they will be able to test you, and we will be able to get a handle on this over the coming months. But it's just so important right now that we all take this seriously and look at what's going on in other countries like France, Spain, Italy, and what China went through, and assume that like we're not going to escape this magically. Like, we have to do social distancing. Sarah said that I heard the virus attaches to materials. Well, there was some research done recently that virus particles can stay alive up to 2 days on metal and plastic surfaces, but on cardboard only 24 hours, and on copper only 6 hours. So that's why you should like spray down your Amazon boxes if you're paranoid, like if you don't want to catch it, you know what I mean? Like, so a good suggestion for anyone who's immune compromised is just to get some gloves. And if you got to go out anywhere in public, use nitrile gloves if you can get them. I think there's another group on Facebook that's for like helping out people, and I think we should all kind of pitch in there and try to help the people in the community that are a bit less fortunate. And maybe if you're not watching this from Strathroy, and try to do something locally in your community, because there's going to be older people that are just afraid right now. They just they're seeing these images of all the toilet paper disappearing from the shelves, and they're like wondering what's going on. So people are going to want help. People are going to be afraid to go out in public if they're immune compromised. So I mean, contact a local, contact your neighbor, your elderly neighbor, and ask them for help. But like, don't get too close to them. Practice social distancing. But the virus can attach to materials. It can attach to doorknobs. It can attach to toilet handles. And some people have been saying that it can't aerosolize, but there's been cases where it has aerosolized via sneezing and toilet flushing. So it's not an airborne illness. So that was an important thing that the paramedic said earlier, that it's not an airborne illness. You don't have to be afraid of this coming into your house, or if you're out walking around and you see a neighbor walk by you, like it's not like mustard gas or something where you got to be really super careful. This is the common advice that's being given right now is that it's spread via droplets in the air, and the droplets are kind of heavier particles, so they fall out of the air. That's why they call them droplets. So within 1.5 meters to 4.5 meters is where this thing is kind of like able to be spread via coughing and normal methods. But there has been cases, like I said, if somebody has diarrhea and they are in a public bathroom and they flush the bathroom, it can aerosolize into smaller particles and go all over the place. So you got to take extra precautions, and that's why I recommend, like, if you're worried about this, if you have a compromised immune system, If you're going into a public bathroom, you should be taking extra precautions and wearing a mask. There's nothing wrong with wearing a mask, if you can get your hands on some. Now, again, that's a message that's been spread, that masks are not effective, but masks are better than no masks. And why do you think like all of Asia is wearing masks right now? And why do you think they're saying save the masks for our public health officials? And like the Strathroy police just put out a notice saying that they're going to be wearing masks. Don't be alarmed. So like masks are effective. It's true that if it's not fitted properly, then it's not as effective, but it's still more effective than, because there's little leaks. And I'm going to have to shave my beard, actually, because if you're going to be wearing a mask, then it can get in through the beard. But N95 masks are definitely effective. Even surgical masks, the more like paper ones, it's better than nothing. So it's unlikely that this thing can aerosolize and that you can catch it that way. If you're nervous about it attaching to like an Amazon box or something like that, then you can just leave the box in your garage for a day or two, or spray it down with some disinfectant. That's what I'm doing right now. I have like a Time disinfectant that's a natural disinfectant, and some isopropyl alcohol, and you just use a spray bottle and spray it down, leave it in the garage. It only takes like 10 minutes or whatever, and then it'll inactivate any viruses that are on the box. So if you're nervous about that, then that's one thing you can do. If anybody has any questions, please post them in here. I don't want to be going too much longer. I just wanted to do that update to make sure that people are aware there is a local case happening here and there is community spreading, and we got to treat this more seriously. I was talking to a counselor today, and the town council and the mayor were, I guess, meeting today, or maybe they're tomorrow, and they're expecting guidance from the provincial government. Like, I've been kind of harsh and trying to like push this message of we have to declare a local emergency right now, and I've been saying like I'm losing confidence in the local leadership to take action, because the longer we delay, every day there's research that's been put out already that like every day we delay declaring a local emergency, or actually getting people off their complacency mindset and really taking action here, and obeying the quarantines and obeying the social distancing, staying home from work if they can, all that stuff. Every day that we delay that, it actually adds exponentially more infections and deaths at the end of the curve, because of the way this thing spreads. And I put a link on the Facebook group for the Strathroy coronavirus Facebook group that shows the different ways the virus spreads. And right now we're in between like suggested attempted quarantine and just nothing, just like a free for all. And we're kind of like halfway in between that. Even though schools have stopped, that's kind of like a quasi-quarantine, because people are still coming back from vacation from wherever and going to work. So what's really needed to stop this thing and prevent it from causing the exponential curve to grow too high that will overwhelm the health system is moderate or strict isolation practices. So that's where we are. And I don't agree with statism, and I don't want to see this become like police enforced quarantines and curfews where we're seeing now in Israel. Actually, there's 2 arrests recently made because people were not obeying their quarantine. I don't want to see that, and I don't think we will see that. I think Canadians, for the most part, are pretty patriotic, and we're a special bunch. But we all got to be on the same page, and we got to understand how serious this is. When Justin Trudeau is on TV saying, "Oh, well, the doctor says that I don't need to get tested because I don't have symptoms," people take that as, "Oh, I guess I can go to work." They don't take that as I have to self-quarantine, I have to stay home. They take that as, this is not that bad, I can go to work, I can do whatever. Because they're living in a different world than Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is like got everything provided for him. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck, and they don't know how to meet their bills, and they're not in that situation where everything's taken care of them for them. So that's why I'm encouraging a more strict sort of like strong language approach to how to deal with this. And the faster we do that, the faster this thing can be over with. So again, that's pretty much about it. Like, if anybody has anything to ask or post, just please do that, and I will try to address it. Lastly, I guess I'd just say, like, share this group. If you have anything of interest in the group, or if you want to start your own local group, if you're not watching this from Strathroy, you should probably do it. It's a good place to share information that you're not going to see in from local officials who are really taking the approach of we don't want to cause a panic. But I mean, I think people deserve true information and assess like a real assessment of the situation over a neutering of the information to not cause a panic. There's a delicate balance between too much information causing a panic and not enough information causing complacency. And I think the language that the Canadian health officials are using right now is causing complacency, and that's dangerous. So in terms of the economic market, like the as I said there, the U.S. stock futures today just about an hour ago got halted. The circuit breakers hit already. It's Sunday. The markets aren't even open. And the Federal Reserve announced a $700 billion quantitative easing. That just means $700 billion of new money just printed from thin air to try to stop this. And they reduced the rates. And that's a huge deal. Like, it's the most, we're at 0% interest rates now. And that is in the U.S. anyways. And the U.S. is like the main economic force here. And that's just it's unprecedented. We're entering into a different paradigm. None of us have ever, like most of us, I'm going to imagine here, have not seen war. We've not lived through anything that's inconvenienced our life really that much. This is going forward going to be a different paradigm. Most of us, like millennials and stuff, and Gen X, are probably too young to have remembered living through the real estate crash that happened in the 80s, in the late 80s. But our parents might have, or our grandparents might have. So you can ask them, like, hey, what was it like when interest rates shot up to 20% in the 80s and people were losing their houses and stuff? So, like, turn to your older generation for advice here. They probably lived through crisis more than we did. But this isn't going to turn into, I don't think this is going to turn into anything like a depression or anything like that. I think they're going to print their way out of it, but that just means it's going to mean tough economic times, and people got to get ready for it. And like, I hope the government can print their way out of it for us, and people can be helped out. But otherwise, let's just try to help each other, get yourself prepared. And if you are an investor, if you do have some extra money, if you've got retirement money in the stock market, if you've got RSPs, if you're from the States and you got a 401k, this is not the time to be in the markets. This is the time to be in the money market, or to be in cash, waiting for the volatility to end. You don't want to lose your entire retirement on a recessionary stock market crash and a bear market. Now, it may not happen that it enters a long bear market, because the U.S. government just printed more money in the last week than they did during the 2008 collapse. During the 2008 collapse, banks stopped lending to each other, liquidity dried up. That just means like they stopped trusting each other and they stopped swapping money, right? That's what caused the economic collapse. It was when the banks stopped lending to each other and they realized all these toxic debts, mortgage-backed securities were not going to be, they were going to go insolvent, right? And so they stopped loaning to each other. And then the government came in and bailed them out and printed $1 trillion or so. I think it was like 500 billion, the first TARP bailout in 2008. Well, in the last week, there's been over $2 trillion printed in the last week. I mean, that's insane. And they're trying to pull out all the stops. They lowered interest rates to the most historic low levels in history. So they're really trying to prevent the market from crashing. But the market already reacted in the futures market, -5%, which is where the first circuit breaker hits. When Donald Trump was elected, that happened. The circuit breaker hit -5, but then it recovered for the next day's trading. So this just means that they've got not many options left for markets and for the economy. I wrote an article about this the other day, and I'll just tell you briefly what I think it's going to happen, what it's going to mean for the average person here coming into the next few months. The stock market, I think, is going to enter into a bear market, and the economy is going to enter into a recession. People are going to be in trouble with financial needs for their businesses. The government is going to have to come in and print money, not just to bail out banks, but also to bail out the average person. We may see things like suspension of mortgage payments for 3 months, a year worth of student loan interest suspension, tax credits, so that maybe you don't even have to pay capital gains tax for a year to spur investors. We're gonna see straight up UBI like checks getting deposited into your account, like the baby bonus, right, or like welfare. Rob saying, "What's a bear market?" Yeah, I forget. Like I'm in the investment community, right? So I use these terms, and I forget sometimes people might not understand it. For the last 10 years, we've been in a bull market. Bulls charge, and bears hibernate. So the nomenclature for investing is when it's a bull market, it's like going up basically, and in a bear market, the market's going down. And we've been in the longest bull market in history. So we're coming on about 12 years of a bull market, and at the end of December, beginning of January this year, there was an exodus of Fortune 500 CEOs and a massive increase of insider stock selling. So the CEOs, like people in Amazon and all these big tech companies, are starting to sell their shares. And that's not to say any kind of conspiracy there between like the coronavirus and the market. It's just the markets were overheated already, and the bear market has begun. Likely, we haven't yet seen the real effects of the coronavirus because we're about 2 weeks behind Italy, China, and France. So we have not yet seen the real life impacts of this virus hitting us and the real economic impacts. All we've seen so far is like the early, signs of people panic buying toilet paper. And it's just, this event is a black swan. They call it a black swan event, which is something that's hard to predict or unpredictable and financially affects the markets. And if this is information like not helping, someone can just tell me to stop rambling about it. But if it's helpful, just give me a like or something like that so I know to keep going. But I do think it's going to be important to understand what's going to be happening in the next couple of months. I know it's not relevant specifically to Strathroy, but I think it's relevant for anybody that's got any kind of investments or is thinking about buying the dip in the stock market. I don't think this is the time to buy the dip. I don't think this is the time to be in the stock market, really. I think you can have some exposure to the stock market. There's a thing called risk management. You don't want to be all in or all out. You don't want to be putting all your eggs in one basket. Thanks, Adam. You want to have some exposure to the stock market, I think, and you want to do that with a registered investor. If you're in Strathroy, call Trevor Rosborough at Masterpiece Financial. I think he's the greatest guy around locally, and he's willing to work with anybody. I went into him and I was interviewing financial advisors because I didn't like the advice I was getting from the banks. No offense to the bank employees, but the Canadian banks are like national monopolies. The local banks, for the most part, are not like locally owned franchises or anything like that. So they kind of have a template that's just funnel everybody into the bank product, and they charge too many fees and stuff. So I recommend an independent financial advisor, and I recommend Trevor Rosborough. He's a great guy. A good example. He's wealthy, he's fit, he's healthy, he's a hard worker. He comes from a good pedigree, and he's a local guy, and he's willing to work with anybody. If you got $500, he'll work with you. So check him out. But yeah, I would move into cash for the most part. You can keep some exposure to the markets, but this is going to be a really volatile market, and we're going into a bear market, like I said, where prices are going to go down in stocks. And the central banks are the ones that print the money for the government or for the country, and they're going to be trying to prop up the stock markets because they don't want to have a depression happen, and they want to just keep it to a recession. And Trump wants a bull market because the election's coming up, and his ego is really tied to the performance of the stock market, and this is really hurting him, his ego, because he always talks about the stock market. So he's pulling out all the stops to prevent the stock prices from going down, but it's just not working, because as the weeks go on and the real impact of the virus hits places like New York City and stuff, it's just going to cause people to sell. And no matter how much printing they do, it's gonna be a recession. So I think it's good to wait it out for now. You don't want to be buying the dip yet, and if you are buying the dip, just like don't buy the whole dip, just buy a little bit. Cash is going to be a good position to be in. There's going to be ripple effects in the real estate market, because our real estate markets here have been overheated for about 3 or 4 years. As Chinese investors were having capital flight happen, so rich millionaires and billionaires in China, they can't get their money out of China. And Chinese investors, like, it's illegal for them pretty much to take U.S. cash outside of China. So they were buying up real estate through relatives and stuff in our biggest cities, in Toronto and Vancouver, and that was causing the real estate markets to go up and up and up. And then we enacted some more strict rules 2 years ago, requiring 5% down payment minimum and higher debt to equity or debt leverage ratios, so that if you don't have the proper income, if you already have too much debt, you can't, it was more strict. You couldn't get a mortgage. So that kind of calmed the markets down a little bit, but not really, because the Chinese investors are facing either losing everything or losing 10%, if they came here, because there was also a foreign investor tax imposed on like vacant properties and vacation properties and stuff for foreign investors in Vancouver. So that helped slow the markets down, but that did not stop the frenzy. And then a lot of that spread to Hamilton, which then spread to London, which now spread to Strathroy. So our prices here were affected, not so much. So we'll be a little bit insulated in Strathroy because we're so kind of like 3 circles away from Toronto. But I would say there's going to be real, like, serious consequences over 3 months. So we're going to say in 3 months, probably negative 30% real estate prices in cities like Toronto and Vancouver. And that's also going to cause ripple effects, and people are going to probably try to sell their houses, and there's going to be too much supply in the market, and that will slowly make its way to like smaller towns like Strathroy. So if you're too leveraged right now, if you have too much debt, if you have, you got to really take that to heart. You don't want to be having too much debt in a situation like this. But anyways, that's kind of like how I see things happening. I know that's not specifically like useful for Strathroy, but hopefully that gives you an idea of like what you can expect, one of the scenarios you can expect, and just kind of try to get prepared for hard times. And then what, if the hard times don't come, then you're just in a better financial position. So if anybody out there wants to read a book on this, the book that I recommend is called Unshakable by Tony Robbins. It's a really good financial book. I'm not really a Tony Robbins guy, but a lot, like the CEO of Salesforce and the CEO of Amazon and stuff, recommended Tony Robbins' book. So I read it and it was really good. So I recommend that. So I guess before I end this, I will just talk about, Sarah asked me, do you think this virus was intended? And I will talk a little bit about some of the more out there theories that are going around. I do see them all, but like my thought on that is, yeah, it's entertaining to think something like that, but it's irrelevant, really. It doesn't matter whether or not this was a bioweapon or an intentional spread to cull the population or anything like this. I don't think it is, but I'm not going to judge you for like entertaining that option as a possibility. Nothing's impossible. I don't think that's what's happening, but more importantly, it doesn't matter if that was what happened. What we should be dealing with now is the real the real consequences in our lives, and stopping this thing before it gets too serious. So I don't think it was a intended virus. I think if you want to go out on a limb, then I think what's more likely was that this was like a tested or even a created strain that they were using for testing in one of the level 4 infectious disease facilities, and it just escaped somehow. I don't think it was, if you wanted to go down that road, I think that is possible. I don't see any evidence or any reason why anybody would release this purposefully. Like, it doesn't really make any sense to me. And I know you can go there and you can entertain that, but like, it's unlikely. Usually the simplest answer is the one that's right, and the simplest answer here is that epidemiologists have been expecting, and pandemic disease experts have been expecting a coronavirus, specifically pandemic, for years now. They've been expecting a virus that came from bats or something else to mutate into a human infectious coronavirus that ends up spreading, because there's been plenty of them in history that have ended up causing lots of carnage. So this is just fully expected to happen. It was just like a matter of time, and we'll be able to get a vaccine for it, and hopefully the United States can find it fast, or Germany actually is working on one right now. I think there's lots of countries working on it right now. See, that's the thing too. I'm very hopeful because technology is advanced so far now, and like the ability to sequence genomes and do artificial intelligence assisted vaccine research has increased so far now, so that we've already sequenced the virus multiple times, and there's already a vaccine for it. So we have the vaccine, it just needs to go through testing. And that takes a little bit of time to go through testing. I imagine there's going to be multiple vaccines, and the United States just enacted a state of emergency last Friday, and that just meant regulations were kind of lifted to prevent or to fast track the vaccine and to help doctors between borders of states go and help each other and stuff like that. So there were some regulations and some red tape cut that will help get the vaccine out quick. So I'm hopeful there's going to be a vaccine soon, and then once we get that, then that will also help curtail the spread of the COVID-19. So hopefully that is helpful, guys. If you have any questions, please put them in here before I end. Someone asked me privately, they said that a coworker had come home from vacation in, I think it was like, some whatever country. And they were sick and they were at work, and the Canadian officials are saying you should self-quarantine. So like, this person was asking me, what should I do? Because they should be quarantining, but they're not. Should I not go to work? Should I tell my employer or whatever? So my advice to that in that situation is, if you're working with somebody who's been on vacation to a place where there's been coronavirus, and especially if they're showing symptoms, you just stay home and talk to your boss about it. Because I'll tell you, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've had employees before, and I'm just a regular guy. So your boss is just like you. They don't know what to do. Your boss is in the same situation. They're worried about this. They're worried about the finances. They're not sure how to deal with this. So if you're like working for a private company and you're not sure how to deal with this, the best thing to do is take your own safety first and talk to your boss about it. You gotta say, like, I'm concerned, like, the guidance from the officials is telling me that I should be quarantining away from people that have been possibly infected, and this person should be home and they're not, so I'm gonna stay home. So I would say to that advice, but also when I was talking to the counselor today, he did tell me, like, they don't want to cause a panic, and also they're not sure really how they should handle it, because they're looking for guidance from the province. So I think that is going to be clear soon. I think probably within the next 24 to 48 hours, we're going to see a lot of private businesses just be shut down. So you'll be staying home anyways. Because if you think about it, your kids are home. People are not allowed to go on March break anymore. And if you know somebody that's still risking going on March break, Canada just announced last night that you should cancel your plans and you should come home if you're away while the transportation is available. Meaning that this thing is a pandemic. It's outbreaking everywhere, all over the world. It's getting worse all over the world, and they're going to shut down the flights. So if you're overseas right now, or you're thinking about going on your vacation, I mean, you're risking being in quarantine in a foreign country with a failing healthcare system. I would rather be here in Canada, where I trust our health system a lot more. Like, I tell you, I don't have complete confidence in the hospitals to be able to handle this, but I have more confidence in the Canadian health system than I do in pretty much any other country, except for maybe a couple of them. So I would rather be here and get sick than, be in in the Dominican Republic, or something like that, where God knows what the hospital system is like, and you won't be able to get back. So yeah, I recommend don't go don't go on your vacation for sure. Got a couple of comments here. Yeah, my wife said I can't get the vaccine, which is true. People that have compromised immune systems can't get vaccines for the most part because you're actually infecting yourself with the virus, and it doesn't have the proper response. It doesn't have the proper antibody building response. It can actually just infect you with that virus. So it's too risky for people with compromised immune systems to get vaccines. But we can have the vaccine be distributed to the general population, and then that will build a herd immunity to the disease, so that it's just like measles and mumps and rubella and smallpox, even Ebola. Like, it still exists. Those were pandemic diseases that wiped out tens of millions or hundreds of millions in some cases of people, that they still exist, but they're not infecting us because of vaccinations. And it's so rare to catch something like that because once you have a herd immunity built up to it, it can't spread through a population. So whether or not you can get the vaccine or not, it's good for people with it's good for people with compromised immune systems and the elderly, because it's unlikely that it'll even spread amongst the community. Adam says, do you have a feeling of any other companies in Strathroy or surrounding area that will be forced to shut down in the next couple of days? I'd say pretty sure that I'm saying I'm going to say more than 50% likely that a lot of local businesses will be forced to enforce work from home, at least. So yeah, I would talk to your boss if you can work from home now. They're probably going to want you to work from home because they don't know, probably don't want to catch coronavirus either. So yeah, we'll wait for the announcement, Adam, but I imagine that is going to happen. Jessica said that I've been 24 hours ahead of helpful news than the actual news has. Thank you. Well, there you go. There's a dap. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It helps to counteract the messages that are like, you're an alarmist and you're fear-mongering and, this is just the flu and stuff like that. So, but again, I totally understand those people. If you're one of those people watching right now who are watching this to kind of be like, oh, look at this idiot talking about coronavirus, which I imagine at least 10% of the people watching right now are thinking, like, looking at me laughing like this guy's crazy. Wait till I start doing my broadcast with my full hazmat suit on, then you'll think I'm really crazy. No, but if you're one of those people, like I don't judge you. I totally understand. We're getting conflicting information, and we're getting our leaders are telling us, they're trying not to cause panic, so they're telling us information that's causing most of us to think that this is okay and we got this under control and it's no big deal, and like we've never dealt with anything like this in our lives before, except for some of the people in Toronto and in the hospital system that have dealt with SARS, but most average people have not dealt with this. So yeah, it's a definitely, we're entering into a different we're entering into a time when there's going to be more people coming to our line of thought, and people will come around, and it's best not to say, haha, I told you so, or like, I've been saying this for months, why didn't you listen to me, you're an idiot, or, whatever. Like, just understand that people will come around eventually, and don't expect them to thank you for being early, or to even admit that they were wrong for judging you or whatever. Just like, it doesn't matter really. Just try not to take any offense to anything at this point, because it's more important that people just come around. So I don't want to create any drama, or make any enemies, or like, use any mean language or whatever, or even say like, I don't know. I just people. I know people's way people react to things. There's a healthy skepticism on both sides. You can be skeptical of me, and that's healthy, because you're thinking, oh, who's this guy? What credentials does he have? Why should I listen to him? Who does he think he is to start a Facebook group? We should just listen to our local authorities. We should just listen to the news. It's a healthy skepticism to have a skepticism of me. It's a healthy skepticism to have of the official story coming out of the news and the health media and the health professionals, because their agenda is to not cause a panic. And so it's healthy to be skeptical of both sides. And eventually there's a common ground in the middle that you will find the truth. And, it's just evolution, right? Like, skepticism is a survival mechanism, and being skeptical of like tigers was kind of like what kept us alive. And anyway, it's just an evolutionary response that's built in to being human, and to have survived this thus far. Our ancestors have survived because of a healthy skepticism and fear. So that's totally understandable. Braden says, why are companies and businesses and all major sports associations only suspending things until early April or a few weeks if this is such a pandemic? So that's a great question. And the reason is they're probably going to end up suspending it longer if the social distancing and the isolation doesn't stop the spread of the disease. So the schools are saying 2 weeks after March break. I imagine that's going to go, I imagine you should get ready for having the kids out of school for a month and a half. I don't think it's going to be 2 weeks after March break. I have a friend right now who's in Wuhan, China. She's been in Wuhan, China since January. She's from Wuhan, China, but she lives elsewhere. She went home for Chinese New Year. She was visiting her parents, and then she was quarantined, and she's still in quarantine. The schools are still shut down. Even though Wuhan, China is the epicenter of the outbreak, and she's, fine, she has food and stuff like that. She's got enough toilet paper. Don't worry, guys, there's going to be enough toilet paper. But there is going to probably be longer quarantines, because when an outbreak happens, if an outbreak happens, they need to wait until it really dies off. Otherwise, it's just going to outbreak again until we have the vaccine that I was talking about. So they're announcing Major League Sports shutting down for a couple of weeks or a month, and schools are stopping for 2 weeks or whatever, but it's likely going to be 2 months or more. If they can stop the spread and we can get an early vaccine, then it'll probably they'll probably reopen things. But the reason why they're being conservative with that is because it costs a lot of money, and they're uncertain. It's costing millions and millions of dollars for all these companies to be shut down like that, and it hurts. So they don't want to shut down for the whole baseball season, or they don't want to shut down for the rest of the NBA or the NHL season. They want to shut down for just as short of a time as possible. But I imagine that it will be shut down longer, and the government will come in with stimulus to help provide relief to not only those businesses but also employees of those businesses who are going to be struggling. And it's a pandemic. The pandemic designation by the WHO is just it's just a dictionary definition. It's a disease that's endemic in multiple countries. An endemic disease is something that's uncontrollably spreading through the population, and a pandemic is an uncontrollable disease that's community spreading through a population in multiple countries. So if you watch the news, you see that's obviously happening, and there's no doubt this is a pandemic, but thankfully we've shut down schools and stuff like that. We're taking steps that hopefully this will not become endemic in Canada, and we won't get to the level of like Italy and France and Spain and everything. Hopefully we've taken action early enough, and people are waking up to this and not being complacent as the days go on, that we will stop it from being such a disruptive thing for so long. But like I said, my friend in Wuhan is still in quarantine, and today Wuhan, China, that was the epicenter of the outbreak, and that's where the first, 15, actually the first like 50,000 cases came from Wuhan, China. And today they just had they slowed it right down, and there's only 4 cases reported today in Wuhan. So even though there's only 4 cases reported, 4 new cases, they still are in quarantine. The schools are still shut down. So it's been 2 months, and it's probably going to be another 2 weeks minimum, right? Because they have to make sure, because there's no vaccine, they have to make sure that this is done. And there's going to be real strict rules going forward until they do have a vaccine in China. But hopefully that answers your question. I tried to cover it from all the different angles I could think about. Mary Ann said, it's good to have a place for people to talk about this. Thanks. Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. And if you have any other questions, just let me know. Joe said, our grocery store is going to close. Have you heard anything? So grocery stores are not going to close. Even in Wuhan, China, and Hubei province, the epicenter of the outbreak, the grocery stores were not closed. They had limited hours, and they had temperature checkers and enforced social distancing and things like that, but nobody ran out of food. And just because the grocery stores and Costco ran out of toilet paper doesn't mean that we have a shortage of toilet paper. You know what I mean? Just because the shelves are empty doesn't mean we don't have the food. There's massive supply of food coming. They have the food in the warehouses and in the distribution centers. I mean, it's not like all the truck drivers are going to get sick with coronavirus all at once, and we won't be able to get the supply chain. The supply chain won't be paralyzed. We won't be running out of toilet paper for good. It's just that they only keep enough for enough forecasted demand to save costs. And I heard recently from a video that the reason why they call them a store is because there used to be, in the olden days, they used to store enough for the community in the building. They used to have a warehouse, like stores used to have a warehouse full of things that they would store it, supplies for the community. But then as we move to a more modern supply chain where it's now considered just in time, which means that we only have enough for normal demand, and then the truckers and the shipping industry and everything, we import most of our things, and then it gets put on trains or trucks or whatever and delivered all over the place. So our just-in-time system is vulnerable to panic, like you saw with recently in the grocery stores. But it's not long-term vulnerable to, it's medium-term vulnerable to supply chain disruptions from countries like India and China that restrict supplies. And that's why we ran out of N95 masks, and why some medicines are kind of in jeopardy, because India and China are dealing with the outbreak themselves. China is the world's factory. Most of the manufacturing in the world happens in China, and the supply chain is heavily dependent on China. When China's dealing with the virus, people are not going to work at the factories, and they're keeping supplies that they do have for themselves so they can deal with the outbreak, which caused a lot of downstream disruption in companies like Apple and car companies that were just basically shutting down their factories because they don't have the supplies. So in India, they produce a lot of our medication, well, at least a lot of the U.S.'s medication, and they do produce a lot of medication. And they announced that they were going to suspend deliveries of certain medications and stuff because they need to keep it for themselves, because they've got 1 billion people and they've got a crappy medical system. It's not nearly as good as ours. So they're going to need all they can get. And China kind of China stopped shipping any face masks because they needed them for their health professionals. But we just saw, as China's getting this under control, we just saw like Italy's now outbreaking, and Italy's having problems with ventilator machines. They don't have enough ventilator machines. They don't have enough masks. They don't have enough sanitizer. So China just donated 24 tons worth of medical supplies to India, thankfully, to help India deal, or sort of Italy, to help Italy deal with the outbreak that's happening in northern Italy. So like 1,000 ventilator machines and millions of masks were donated by China to help Italy. So it's not like they're shutting it completely down. It's just there was a supply chain disruption, but just it's very unlikely that we will see long-term supply chain disruptions, but we will see long-term or medium to long-term economic impact because of the supply chain disruption. Do you know what I'm saying? So it will have economic impact, but it's not like we're going to run out of everything. And hopefully that explains that question. But I guess to be more to the point, like locally, grocery stores will probably not close, but a lot of things will close, I think, and bars and non-essential businesses. But we're going to have all the essential businesses like the LCBO and the beer store. They're not going to close. People need their beer. Actually, just kidding. Those are the ones that are going to close probably. But they may have limited hours. But we'll see grocery stores, pharmacies, things like that will stay open because people need food and people need medication. So Suzanne said, look, there looks to be a good progress towards containments of the virus being studied at McMaster at the moment. It's only a matter of time, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, that's hopeful. That's great that we will be able to contain it. And that's why I'm pushing with strong language in this group and trying to influence local officials to declare some sort of local state of emergency or local medical emergency so that people will treat this seriously and realize, oh, I probably shouldn't go to that Stag and Doe because I'm going to catch coronavirus and then spread it to my grandmother. You know, we don't want people being complacent about this, because it's not that individually the coronavirus is so bad that you got to like shut down businesses. It's not like Ebola where if you catch it, you're dead. It's more like it'll the combined infections of the population combined with the percentage of complications will overrun the health system. So Joe said, why don't we hear anything from council? You should be part of council. Thanks, Joe. I don't really participate in... I was gone for a second. Yeah, I was gone there for a second, my internet. They're trying to shut me down! I'm being censored! I'm gonna turn into Alex Jones here in a minute. Drink your colloidal silver, folks! Wear a tinfoil hat. It's the only way to stop the coronavirus. Can you hear me? Looks good. Okay, so I was asking the same question about the local council, and like, we have heard from the local council. It's just that their broadcasting methods are not good enough. Yeah, time to buy a boat and run the pirate news. They did release statements over the last couple of days. I don't think they're doing it effectively enough, but that's why I started this group, because they're posting on the local website, but like, who checks the local website? Who checks the Strathroy Caradoc clinic website to see that, oh, there's coronavirus here? Who checks the local town website? Nobody checks that. There needs to be more, like, a better way to spread this information. And, like, I was trying to post this on the Just Ask Strathroy page, and, like, that's a big distribution network for Strathroy. But, you know, like I was saying earlier, some people are just more like, this is just a flu kind of thing, or, like, who are you to be giving this information? Like, why should I listen to you? So there was I guess the admins were skeptical about me. giving that information. Like, why should we trust you? And that's understandable, but it doesn't matter because I started this group because I just decided, like, it's somebody has to put this out, and local council have a mandate to not spread panic and fear, and they don't want to be seen as pushing wrong information. Like, if they declare a local medical emergency and then it turns out to be not such a big deal, that's not going to look great on them. But, like, I don't care what people think of me. Like, you can think I'm a crazy lunatic for, like, it doesn't matter to me. So I got nothing to lose. You can't cancel me. I don't have a job to, like, go to, so I don't have a job to lose. So I'm fine with with looking like a total idiot and saying dumb things because no one can cancel me. Even on Joe said even on my FM, they don't hear anything. Well, Chris Soares came into the group and Chris was posting some good stuff in there. The local police put out a statement, and there was a couple of things he posted in the group, and I pinned them as announcements. So Chris said that he's going to start covering it more, so that's great. But even like my FM, a lot of people don't listen to my FM. Most of us get our information from Facebook locally. So I just want to urge the Just Ask Strathroy admins to be a bit more open-minded about this and try to link to the page and push people here. If they don't want coronavirus information being put on the Just Ask Strathroy page or on your local local Facebook swap page or whatever, then start one yourself and just try to encourage them to push people that want to learn about local coronavirus information to that group. That's basically that. So I've been doing this for like an hour, so I should probably stop. If anybody has any final questions, send them here. Looks like no questions. What this is greens, athletic greens with some liposomal vitamin C blended into it. An important thing for this to not catch the coronavirus is to have a healthy immune system. So I'm trying to not be too give alternative medical advice or whatever, but there is scientific studies that have come out recently showing that liposomal vitamin C is a very bioavailable, effective way to build your immune system, and if you can get that, just vitamin C in general is good, but the liposomal stuff is great. And get lots of sleep. Honestly, sleep is better for your immune system than than vitamins. Like you're gonna get vitamins and minerals from your diet. The link to this, Rob, I got it on Amazon. It's from LIV Labs. Oh, LIVON, Livon, like LIVON Labs, and it's liposomal vitamin C. I'll post a comment after this is done. Adam said, are you going to do another video tomorrow? Well, probably. I imagine there's going to be a lot of new news come out tomorrow, and we'll try to keep things going in the group, but I will do another video if anything materially changes, then I'll do a video. All right, well, thanks folks for tuning in again, and feel free to share this, and please get the information out, and let's just be respectful to people who are not on our page yet, not on our side, that aren't really ready for accepting the information about how serious this is. And let's understand that people are living paycheck to paycheck for the most part, and it's hard for them to really comprehend the disruption that this is going to cause, like why it's worth disrupting their life when they're a healthy person. It's just a different frame of mind than someone that has been following this for 6 months, 6 weeks, or someone that has a compromised immune system, or has an older parent that lives with them, or an older grandparent that lives with them. Most people are living in a different bubble. Like, most people live in a world where they're healthy. They may be a little bit overweight or something, but they're healthy. They have a healthy immune system. They have a job that they go to that pays them an average of $40,000 a year. they have a mortgage, they're living paycheck to paycheck, they have a lot of debt. So as long as they're being told, we got this under control, and we suggest not, self-isolation, like as long as the messaging is soft, that person is going to be of the mindset of, this doesn't affect me, the coronavirus is no worse than the flu, why should I care? And not only why should I care, but like my reality is I have to go to work, I have to pay my bills. What am I going to do if I don't go to work? So just be understanding of people, and they will eventually come around, but we got to help encourage them to come around. And Sandra says my FM has been doing updates all weekend and will continue this week as they receive information. So that's awesome. I'm going to start listening to them a bit more then, especially because this is happening locally. So that's great. That's great to hear that they've been covering it. So now we have a Facebook page that we can spread the information on, and we have my FM that's going to be doing local information. So I hope that changes people's perspective, and they realize that this is not something to be complacent about. But anyway, thanks a lot for tuning in. Share this with your friends that may think this is just the flu. And I'll see you maybe tomorrow, or see you on the page. Bye-bye.